Hey there, Ryan Reynolds here. It's a new year, and you know what that means. No, not the diet. Resolutions. A way for us all to try and do a little bit better than we did last year. And my resolution, unlike big wireless, is to not be a raging and raise the price of wireless on you every chance I get. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited. See mintmobile.com for details.
This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like you know to check the date of the big game first before you accidentally buy tickets on your 20th wedding anniversary and have to spend the next 20 years of your marriage making up for it. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
Since you're new to H&R Block, we'll look at your returns from the last 3 years for any money your last guy might have missed for free.
I could get money back from last year?
You could. We'll find any mistakes.
Could have really used that 2 years ago when I dated that mistake for 5 months.
Don't leave money on the table. Switch to H&R Block and get a free second look review. Second look is included at no additional cost with the purchase of tax preparation. Results vary. All tax situations are different. Fees apply if you have us file an amended return.
You know what's smart? Enjoying a fresh gourmet meal at home that you didn't have to cook. Meet Factor, your loophole in the laws of mealtime. Chef-crafted meals delivered with a tap, ready in just 2 minutes. You know what's even smarter? Treating yourself without cheating your goals. Factor is dietitian approved, chef prepared, and you plated. Pretty smart, huh? Refresh your routine and eat smart with Factor. Learn more at factormeals.com.
Hey there, Duke fans, and welcome to DBR Bites, episode number 85. We are back. It's Jason and I still. I'm Donald. We are here 14 seconds after we finish recording DBR Bites, DBR episode 686. Hey, Jason, 686. We might be getting close to, calling the dog back.
Oh, yeah. Kenny Denard, you out there listening, baby? We got to get you on for 700.
We got to get the dog signal in the air to get him back on the show. But before we do that, we obviously got a lot of ground to cover. We're going to cover in this episode the preview for the game tonight. I guess we're going to be sending this out on Monday against the NC State Wolfpack. That game programming note is at 8:30 p.m. Eastern time on ESPN. TGL is on beforehand. It's Tiger versus Rory's team. So it's a chance that this game starts on another channel because that's a 6:30, I guess, first shot or tee off, I guess. So until then, if it's at 8:30, chances are it might start on ESPN News or the ESPN Plus app. So check your local listing. So let's first get into the NC State Wolfpack. They come to town. They are 9-10. They are 2-6 in the ACC. That is 15th. They are 101st in KenPom as of right now, 120th in the net. And Jason, this team, I'm sure you've seen a lot of their games over the last couple of days because they've had some very close games over the last 2 or 3 weeks. They have 2 top 100 KenPom wins. That's against Florida State and Notre Dame. They have a couple of other wins: USC Upstate, Presbyterian, Coastal Carolina, Colgate, William and Mary, Coppin State, and Rider. None of the teams.
Those are not impressive teams, Donald.
They're not impressive teams. Again, their only top 100 wins are against their two ACC wins, Florida State and Notre Dame. Their losses, again, some pretty decent teams, really good teams, actually. Purdue, BYU, Texas, Kansas, UVA, Wake Forest, UNC. They're 2 really bad ones were Virginia Tech and Cal. Those 2 losses. And then yesterday, on Saturday, they just lost to SMU. Now, the thing about NC State, they are not the cardiac Wolfpack like they were last year. They have 7 games this year so far that have been decided by 6 or fewer points. They are 1-6 in those games. And 5 of those games were within 3 points or less. The last 5 games all fall into that category. They won against Notre Dame, 66-65, and then they've lost the last 4. Last 5. Now,
last 4.
Last four. Yes, they've lost four straight. They've lost 7 in the last 8. Against SMU, they were actually up 15. I'm sorry, they were down 15. They caught all the way up. They get to within 1, and then because they're so tired, they can't break through and get the win. They eventually lose by 6. So, Jason, I give it to you for the offense and defense. They're very similar, how they play an offense and defense, and it's interesting because if you look at them in the eye test, it kind of differs a little bit from some of the things that you see in the metrics because, again, sometimes they just get sloppy with the basketball.
Yeah, look, as you said, this is a team that has now fallen out of the top 100 in Ken Palm. Pomeroy, by the way, predicts that Duke wins this game by 22 points, 77-55. And as you were saying, they're equally bad at both ends of the floor. They do not have a top 100 offense. They do not have a top 100 defense. And this is an NC State team that is really poor on the boards. They're 319th in defensive rebounding. Duke's going to get some offensive rebounds against this club. Almost a third of missed shots become offensive rebounds for NC State. And when you're a team, look, you can maybe afford to be bad at defensive rebounding if you're doing other stuff well on defense. That's not the case for NC State. They do make you on defense. They do make you work for a bucket. They're like one of the 5 or 6 slowest teams in the country on defense. So you have to take your time to find the shot you want. They do a decent job of forcing turnovers, top 50 in the land at forcing turnovers. Though it's weird. It's kind of their turnovers mostly come from like travels, throwing the ball out of bounds, offensive fouls, that kind of stuff. Not a lot of live ball steals on defense, so they don't get to race the other direction with the ball. With all those turnovers. They do a good job protecting the three-point line. They don't give up a lot of threes, and that's a huge part of Duke's offense. One of the really interesting parts of this game, I think, is going to be, is Duke able to get off from three the way they usually try to at home? Because NC State is a team that does a fairly decent job of preventing teams from taking and making three-pointers. And NC State on defense is very interesting that they are not a team that gives up a lot of points. There has not been a single opponent who scored 80 points on them all year. As I mentioned, Ken Pomeroy projects Duke to score 77 points in this game. But State struggles so much on offense. They're a team that struggles to get more than 60-ish. If Duke gets into the 70s or approaching 80, I doubt you'll see NC State able to keep up with them. They're really good, State is, at holding on to the ball. They don't make turnovers. Top 20 in the land at turnover percentage. They have the 8th best offensive steal percent. You don't get steals against them, which is just really impressive. So they get a lot of shots, but they don't make them. They're hitting barely 30% from 3. They're, just an average team shooting 2s. And that combines, don't hit your 3s. Not really good from 2. It makes them one of the bottom 100 or so teams in the country on effective field goal percentage, which is, that's a real problem. That's one of the most important advanced stats is effective field goal percentage. They don't shoot a lot of 3s. I mentioned they don't hit them. They don't really shoot a ton of them. And as a result, only about 25%, a little less than 25% of their total points come from behind the 3-point line, which is one of the 20 lowest percentages of anyone in the country. And just so folks can compare that to Duke, like I said, NC State, 25% of their points come from 3. Duke gets close to 40% of our points from the 3-point line. And it's just a stark difference in, how NC State is able to score. And and it's part of why they struggle to score in bunches. They are a very, very experienced team that will put the ball on the floor and attack the basket. That is on offense. That is what they do. Attack the basket, that just again and again. They're trying to get to the free throw line, and they do get the free throw line a pretty good bit. And they hit their free throws decently once they get there. But that's their method of attack. They're not a team that's going to score on you by getting outside shots.
You mentioned the tempo, and I think it's important to note that while they are one of the 5 slowest teams on defense, they are not much better on offense. And the reason why a lot of their games are in the under 80, right? No, their opponent has not scored under 80 points, is because the games are so slow. They have they have certain. I mean, if you think about it, one of the stats that we like to track on KenPom is the number of possessions in a game. Over 70 is considered a fairly high tempo.
Yeah.
Under 65 is considered a very slow tempo. They have 3 games under 60. They have 2 games that were 59 possessions and 1 game that was at 58. And it's because the one thing that you mentioned, that they like to get a lot of non-steal turnovers. They make the shot clock go off in a lot of games, and they make it both on offense and defense. The shot clock will get a workout. So that is an interesting thing because Duke obviously likes to get the tempo up to closer to 70 possessions. We want more chances with the basketball because we'll get more points out of that. And whether it's methodical or whether it's just they're figuring it out on offense, they're trying to slow the game down, not necessarily to UVA, pack line, speed, but they're trying to get this game down because they figure the fewer possessions they have, the fewer chances they have to mess up, and the fewer opportunities their opponent has to shoot them out of it.
Speaking of the possessions, they have had exactly 1 game against a power conference. I'm not counting that, when they play USC upstate, they get a lot of possessions because that's it's a completely overmatched opponent. But against power conference teams, they've had exactly 1 game where they exceeded, you mentioned 65 possessions being sort of that, are you playing a slower or faster game? Only 1 game where they've exceeded 65 possessions. That was their game against Florida State. That game went to overtime.
Yes.
So
imagine how many.
And I'm sure there were more than 4 possessions in overtime. Basically, you cannot play a game against NC State that gets, above 65 possessions. Usually it's down 61, 62, 63, as you mentioned, sometimes 58, 59. It's going to be really interesting to see sort of who's able to put their imprint, especially when Duke is on offense and NC State is on defense. Because, State is super, super slow on defense, but Duke's reasonably fast on offense. And, Duke wants to push the pace. We want to let our athleticism and our skill, play against a defense that isn't completely set. And that's going to be one of the important battles in this game. If this game is slow, then that's playing into NC State's hands.
Right. And that also means that for Duke, make every possession count because you don't know when the next one's coming, right? Like you're living possession to possession in this game. So you need to make sure that whether you make the shot or not, right? You can have a possession that counts, that that was worth it, that the shot doesn't end up in the bottom of the hole, but you want to make sure that every possession counts so you get the best opportunities on every single possession. Let's pause it right here, Jason. We'll talk about players. We'll talk about matchups. First, we got to take a quick break, so we'll be right back. All right, we're back. We're continuing our preview of the game against NC State. We turn our attention to the players. And Jason, there's a lot of transfers on this team, but just kind of like last year, there's guys that we recognize that have kind of been a thorn in our side, whether they be for NC State or somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly. There are a fair number of names that you're definitely going to recognize. A lot of them are guys who transferred into NC State last year or the year before. Mm-hmm. It's not that these are homegrown NC State players, but it is a super, super experienced NC State team. The top 7 guys, and by the way, they play fairly deep. They're probably going to be at least 8, probably 9 guys get meaningful minutes in this game for NC State. But their top 7 guys in terms of minutes, every single one of them is a senior or a 5th-year player, a grad student player. And 2 of those super experienced players, the leaders of the team, so to speak, are guards Jaden Taylor and Marcus Hill. They both average a little more than 12 points per game. Hill is the newcomer. He's the transfer guy who just came in this season. He played a couple of years of JUCO ball. He went to Bowling Green, and then now he's all the way up at NC State. This is a guy who relentlessly attacks the rim. You're going to hear me talk about that again and again. He gets to the free throw line a lot. Like last year when he was at Bowling Green, he was like one of the national leaders at getting to the free throw line. He averaged like 20 points per game for Bowling Green. It was because he got to the line like 7+ times per game. And he's done a pretty good job of translating that to the higher level here at NC State. Not a big outside shooter is Marcus Hill. Only takes about 2 3-pointers a game, hits them at about a 25% rate. I mean, frankly, we've talked about the fact NC State's just not a good 3-point shooting team. Jaden Taylor was there a year ago. Very nice outside shooter. Takes about 4 3-pointers a game, hits around 35% of them. He's the guy on this team you need to worry about when it comes to outside shooting. He is another guy who attacks the rim and draws fouls. Has really good hands, by the way, Jaden Taylor does. He'll get in passing lanes. He'll slap balls away from guys who are dribbling the ball. He's the guy who's sort of their most pesky defender. And then the other guy they have on the wing that I wanted to mention is Dontrez Styles. He was at North Carolina a couple years ago. He was I don't want to say big time recruit, but he was like a top 50, top 60 recruit for the Tar Heels. Never really worked out for him there at UNC. He went off to Georgetown, had a fairly decent year at Georgetown last year, and now he's back in the triangle for his senior season. He was a very nice outside shooter at Georgetown, hit about 37% from three. So far, he's struggled at it. He's only hitting around 30% from three this year, but he's going to fire away out there. He's a physical defender. He's a legitimate, ACC talent, and an interesting player just because of his history here in the Triangle. I think anybody who plays at UNC and then plays at NC State, that's sort of a compelling kind of transfer. And then one other guy I really wanted to. There's so many guys in this. This is an NC State team with a ton of guys who played between like 15 and 25 minutes. I'm not going to go through all of them. But there's one other guy I wanted to mention. It's their best player in the middle is Mikey O'Connell. I'm sorry. I said Mikey O'Connell. I mean Ben Middlebrooks.
I was going to say.
I don't know how I did. Mikey O'Connell
plays too. He's a real human being with feelings.
How did I say? It's so funny. I was thinking of Ben Middlebrooks and I wrote down Mikey O'Connell. I don't know how I did that. Ben Middlebrooks is the guy in the middle, 6'10", 240. He was like their do-it-all during their run at the end of last season in the ACC tournament and the NCAA tournament. Ben Middlebrooks would just he'd do all the little stuff for them. He was the guy who was like drawing offensive fouls, getting key rebounds and all that other kind of stuff. Not necessarily scoring a ton, although he did score some, but just a pest on the inside. And that's kind of the role he's playing again this year. He is now a starter, and he just fights you. He knows how to use his strength, his size, his physicality to get good angles on players. For a guy who is not like a dominant athlete, he gets like almost 2 blocks per game. I mean, he protects the rim. He's a really good screen and roll kind of guy. He's a strong offensive rebounder for them. They're not a good offensive rebounding team, but he's a guy who's going to fight you for offensive rebounds and draw fouls on the interior. He's going to be, I think, a really interesting matchup. It's very possible you're going to see him guarding Cooper Flagg a good bit because they've got other big men who maybe aren't quite as mobile, aren't quite as crafty and the such. So I could see him on Cooper some. And I also expect we're going to see him on Man-Man. And Man-Man's going to have an advantage in size on Middlebrooks. They list Middlebrooks at 6'10". I think he's more like 6'9". But Middlebrooks, he's going to fight you. And if NC State's going to have a chance in this game, I think we're going to be hearing Ben Middlebrooks' name called a lot, whether it's drawing charges or just being physical and interfering with what Duke's trying to do on offense and on the boards. I think he's a really, really big key for them in this contest.
He is 4th in the ACC in total blocks. And as you mentioned, it's not that he's jumping out of the gym to volleyball swat shots. He has great positioning. He stands straight up. He knows where to be on the floor. And like you said, he kind of has the right angles to get into that good position. And when he's there, he's a rock. He's not moving. So, I think
a smart play, a smart
guy
who understands basketball IQ. That's what I'm looking for. That's what he's got in spades.
He was awake in geometry class, that's for sure, because he can get to the right spot and he knows how to get it in as efficient, as fewer steps as possible to get into the right position. You mentioned him. I think I want to see him on Cooper Flagg because I think they have another guy, Brandon Huntley Hatfield, who's going to be probably spending more of his time against Man-Man and Patrick Gongba, right? Like he's going to be the guy kind of patrolling the center so that Ben Middlebrooks can get that opportunity to really go up against Cooper Flagg and try and limit him. Again, the word is kind of out on some of these guys, right? For Duke, the physicality part of it. Ben Middlebrooks can give you that. And so not just his positioning, but he can kind of stand there and kind of, if you're going to, try and chip at him, he can, push back. So you're going to get a little bit of that from him. And so I'm interested to see that matchup. That's going to be interesting. Anything else on the players before we move on?
No. Like I said, they're just a lot of different guys who you mentioned Huntley Hatfield. I accidentally mentioned Mikey O'Connell.
He's going to play. He's going to play.
Yeah. Mikey O'Connell's a good player. He's a guy who's going to fire it up from the perimeter as well. He's like he's one of the starters on the wing. I guess he's probably the starting point guard at this point. Although they've got a lot of different guys who handle the ball for them. But yeah, go ahead and get more into the matchups because there's some interesting stuff to hit on there.
Yeah, I was going to say Mikey O'Connell is going to be a guy who's going to distribute the ball quite a bit. He averages almost 4 assists a game, so he's their main distributor on offense. But yeah, let's get to a couple of things to watch out for when we take on NC State. The first thing is steals. You mentioned this. NC State, on offense, they take care of the basketball. They're the best in the ACC at doing that. Duke, for all of our defensive accolades, we're the worst in the conference at defensive steal percentage, and that, again, we keep saying we attribute to the fact that Malik Brown is out because he was deflecting so many passes. So I want to see how that combats, especially in Cameron Indoor Stadium. Are we able to kind of overcome that? 3-point percentage. Duke is excellent at shooting. NC State, bad at shooting and defending the three. And so you mentioned the fact that they don't shoot a lot of threes and they don't make a lot of threes. We like to shoot threes and we like to make them. So I'm interested to see how that NC State's perimeter defense matches up against our shooting. We just had a terrible shooting day in Winston-Salem. Can we leave that in Winston-Salem and come back to Cameron where we know the rims, we know the gym, we know the sight lines, and we're able to, kind of get back on our shooting success. And then the third thing that I have, Jason, power through tired legs. This, as I mentioned, we had a Sunday, Tuesday kind of turnaround when we played Louisville and Incarnate Word in early December. This is our first Saturday, Monday back to back. And so 2 games in 48 hours. This is exactly, as we mentioned, we're going to see this in the NCAA tournament. We're going to have games every day in the ACC tournament. This is the first of those tests to prepare ourselves for that by powering through those tired legs, making sure that mentally we're sharp. That is something that has kind of eluded us in some games recently. Being able to turn it around and provide the same amount of effort and it kind of, again, continue to get better as a team. You want to go through this stretch 2-0. And again, we're part of the state tournament right now. The Big Four. This is the second Big Four opponent we'll see. And the other thing about this, Jason, focus on this game for this game. Do not look towards Saturday night. We don't need to worry about that until after we take care of business on Monday night.
Yeah. Hey, before we go, I just wanted to mention an overlooked part of basketball, inbounding the ball. Donald, I happened to watch a couple games on Saturday.
We watch these games.
Yeah, we were texting each other as they were happening.
There's a lot of basketball.
yeah, there's a lot of basketball watching on Saturday. I know. My wife was like, "Is there another game on? Is there another game?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's Auburn, Tennessee. Yeah, it's
I didn't
Kansas, Houston, sweetie. I gotta watch that game. Yeah,
I haven't changed the channel, so just be fine with it."
A very underrated skill is the ability to inbound the ball correctly and actually have it go to one of your teammates. I think that Boston College just threw away a game against UNC. Now, in terms of the ACC and the ACC getting bids to the NCAA tournament and such, this was actually a good result for the conference that Carolina won the game because a loss there probably sends Carolina off the bubble and makes it really tough for the ACC to get 5. Heck, I'm wondering even sometimes if the ACC is going to get 4 teams in the tournament at this point. But Boston College blew that game because in the final, 30 seconds or so, like they couldn't inbound the ball multiple times. But at least they're better than Kansas. Oh my God. Kansas lost a game to Houston where with 1 minute and 10 seconds left, they had a 6-point lead. They were about 95% to win the game at that point. So it happened.
Forget all that, Jason. They had a 6-point lead with 15 seconds left.
10! 6-point lead with 10 seconds left in overtime. And they were, by the way, Pomeroy's projection, They were 98.6% to win the game at that point, and they couldn't inbound the ball. They ended up just tossing it. It was unbelievable. They just tossed it to
after a timeout where they had a play designed.
Yeah, and by the way, when they there were a couple times in that game they couldn't inbound the ball. I noticed. I'm like, Bill Self is supposed to be a good coach. No one ran to the guy inbounding the ball. Like everybody was just running around like around the foul line. No one went closer to him so that he could throw a shorter pass. It was abysmally bad execution. And I just wanted to mention very briefly, Saturday was an incredible day of college basketball. The Tennessee Auburn game was a great game. Auburn pulled it out at the very end. There's another game. Tennessee, they probably had that game and they just couldn't execute in the final seconds. So it was a fun day of college basketball, but I was just marveling at how many times I was watching a close game in the final seconds and teams couldn't inbound the ball.
Hey, late in our game, right? We had a couple possessions out of bounds where they kind of deflected, and I was like, no. Stop that. Get together, get in a huddle, and get this ball inbound, and we were able to do so. But yeah, we had a couple of shaky moments as well. It just was permeating across college basketball. So yes, thank you for that. Before we end it, Jason, I just want to make a programming note. Tomorrow night, of course, we're going to be playing Duke, Duke's going to be playing NC State at 8:30.
No, you said tomorrow night. You mean tonight? Because this episode that we're recording it on Sunday is coming out on Monday.
Correct. Monday night, Duke is going to be taking
time warp, baby. We're in a time warp.
Time is a flat circle. Duke is going to be playing NC State on Monday night. At around the same time as tip-off, the ACC football schedule will be released. So that's normally something that we like to cover on this show. But of course, we're going to be covering the recap. So rest easy. We got it covered. We're going to figure out a way to incorporate it into one of these podcasts this week because we got a week of podcasts that are coming your way. Because there's a lot of stuff that is going on in the world.
Don't mention their name.
In the world,
we're not looking ahead. Not looking ahead yet.
We're not looking ahead. I'm just saying this week you're gonna hear our voices quite a bit, and so the football schedule will come at a later date. We're going to be obviously focused on watching the basketball, but then after that is done, we will be crunching numbers on our football schedule as well. So we are looking forward to if we're going to look ahead, we're going to look ahead 9 months down the road to the second year of Manny Diaz, and we're going to look forward to that particular season. But for now, we will end it on this episode of DBR Bites. Jason, thank you for doing this double dance with me on a Sunday morning. We got two down, several more to go. We're getting closer to that ever-loving number of 700 on the main episode side. But until then, he is Jason. I am Donald. After the game, get your DBR headlines in, dbrpodcast@gmail.com. But we will see you after the game. Now it's time for the Duke Band to play us out and take us home.